I'm Carina Paine Schofield. I am the director of the Leadership Research Lab at Hult International Business School. My interest in this area is from my experience as a working parent. I've taken 3 lots of maternity leave and returned to an organisation, and it was something I struggled with and I wanted to help other individuals with. So that started off my interest in this area. And then I was lucky enough to meet Helen and Alison. So we started to collaborate on a research project. And I just want to mention another person involved in this research project is Lee Waller, who is faculty at Hult International Business School with me too. So firstly, I thought it'd be useful to give you a bit of background about our methodology and what we did. So this first phase of our research project was primary research consisting of qualitative data collection. The focus at this stage was very much on the individual, on the working parents, mums and dads who had recently returned to their workplace. And we used semi-structured interviews, and we started using an inductive approach. So we provided an open question to allow the parent to narrate their experience. So asking them to tell us about your experience, tell us about your journey from getting ready to maternity leave, through to return to work, through to now. And this narrative account took up about half of the interview. And then following this, we used a deductive approach to explore specific topics. And these topics were based on existing external literature and on the previous experiences of the research team with working parents. We included questions around the whole self, identity, role models, support, future work plans, and so on. And we spent around an hour and a half interviewing each person. There was 28 interviews in total, 14 mums and 14 dads. This equated to around 40 hours of stories, of depth interviews. We conducted all the interviews virtually and recorded them and transcribed. But all this time we spent with the working parents, we really got to feel, what they were feeling, the journey that they had gone through. Then when we had all the data, we put it through software and analysed it all, looking for various themes. And we spent probably well over 100 hours analysing all of the stories. People had invested their own time and they had shared so much with us. We really wanted to make sure that we got their stories right. And that's what I want to share with you now, the stories of these parents. So before I talk through detailed findings, it's really useful to hold in your mind these 5 main themes that emerge from the research: balance, identity, choice, role models, and organisation. So we can go through each one of these in turn, and I'll describe the key findings along with some example quotes to illustrate the main points within that theme to share their stories. A critical point to mention here is that when we went into the interviews, we really felt that there had been many similarities for the mums and the dads. However, we found that they had completely different experiences. So when talking about each of the themes, I'll describe the findings for mums and then for the dads, and then illustrate the contrast between the two. So taking the first theme around balance. So for the mums, we've called it the impossible balance. Mums were constantly trying to balance their time, boundaries, identities between work and family, and in short, trying to do everything, trying to be superwoman. Mums describe this challenge of the constant shift from mum to worker even before their baby arrived. A mum, Kate, here, you can read her quote there. She said, "I was working from 8 a.m. until 8, 9, 10 p.m. at night. And, 8.5 months pregnant, it was really, really hard. I was getting really stressed. I couldn't do all the stuff your doctor asked you to do. It really hit home to me that it wasn't working well when I actually had to remember and work out when the baby was kicking." Mums also describe the struggles when they first return to work. So one of the mums, Jennifer, describes it's really hard for a person to go from being off, spending literally 24 hours a day with your baby, to some days spending just half an hour. And then she talks about, I didn't see my baby at all yesterday. He was asleep before I left, and then he was in bed when she got home. And then, despite the practical solutions that the mothers had created to balance their time, they were working in the evening, they were working when their baby was asleep, trying to align work days and nursery days. They were still facing emotional, mental, and logistical challenges, trying to juggle their dual roles. And then the result of this battle of the balance was exhausted mums who more often than not described feeling guilty, fearful, inadequate. They were feeling that they weren't living up to this idea of being superwoman. And then one mum, Amy, describes this: I think I've always imagined you could be all of these things, a reliable, competent colleague and a parent. And it's become clear to me it's not possible to work a million hours a week and be ever present for your child. You can't be all those things. And I find it dissatisfying that you have to choose. Around the theme of balance for the dads, it was really all about balancing finances. So in the interviews, particularly at the start of the interviews, this is in the open narrative with no prompts. Most of the dads were initially very focused on finances. They were working out how to balance the books with less money coming into the home when either they or their partner took leave. For example, James on here describes, if my wife works full-time as well as me, we'd end up losing money because of the childcare. By her being part-time and me being full-time, we earn more than if we both work full-time, which is quite ridiculous. So he was trying to work out the sense in that. Dads were also trying to work out how to maximise money and to some extent play the system to ensure there was maximum money, but also maximum time with their new child. So Andrew was describing, you want to make sure you're spending time with your child, and I guess that's the balance that you have in life, trying to make sure you're keeping a roof over your head and keeping your children happy. And most of the dads described how they wanted to spend time with their child. They really enjoyed spending that time. I mean, John here sums it up. I don't think there's too many dads that if they were told they could spend time with their kids, that they would say no. And one dad called Will, he provided this advice to other dads. If there's implications in terms of career and finances, as I'm sure there will be, just make sure you're aware of those and that you've thought them through and you can manage them. I guess for me, kind of making sure you didn't miss out. Work is paying for life and not the other way around. And then moving on to a theme related to identity. Mums struggled to integrate their identities in a way that allowed them to be their whole self. This is the theme that is of most interest to me because this is what I really struggled with when I went back to work. And these mums that we spoke to shared the same feelings. They talked about how they would consider how much of their parental identity to take to work, and they often told us how they kept their work and parental identities separate. Even if mums thought it was important to bring their whole self to work, they were still prone to pick one identity over the other at certain times, and they found it hard to switch between identities. A particular struggle was around trying to re-establish their work identity on their return to work. So there's a quote here from Makara, who'd been back at work 4 months, but had returned before she wanted to. So she describes, I don't think my work identity has been established yet because I'm 50% here, 50% there. I don't know if I've got that work professional balance just yet. And much of the struggle with these mums seemed to come from the fear of being judged as less capable or less committed. And it resulted in mums hiding the parental challenges they were facing. So some mums found it hard to integrate their identities due to a fear of losing themselves too. Isabel described, I'm very interested in my career, but my family is the most important thing. I don't want people to say, oh, she's a new mum, she doesn't want to be involved in this project. Or I don't want to use the mum or the child card as an excuse. I want to be defined as myself and not by being a mum. And then for the dads were really proud of their parental identity. Dual identities for dads are becoming more prominent. in part due to COVID and more flexible and remote working options, meaning the dads are around at home a lot more than they used to be. And the dads we spoke to were really embracing their parental identities, and they seemed to choose whether they shared it or hid it or used it to their advantage. Some dads described how they never had a problem combining identities, whilst others wanted to keep them distinct to allow them to focus on work and parenting separately. But the key thing here was that it was their choice. And then Krishna, one of the dads, sums this up. Some dads choose whether they want to advertise their parental identity. Some want to come in a mask and hide the bit about the parent side. You just need to work out which camp you're in. And dads also consistently compared their experiences, good and bad, to that of their female colleagues. Through this, they were aware of the double standards between mums and dads. And there's a couple of quotes here. James described, I think it's also different for men, though, as well. It feels to me, as a parent, as a man, you're not necessarily seen as the parent, you're seen as a person who has children. And another dad, Will, described how everyone likes a dad taking time out for their kids in a way they can find it annoying when a woman does the same. And related to this, many of the dads had a newfound respect for working mums. So Krishna described, I didn't appreciate how challenging it is and how much women give up. If I encounter anyone who's in a childcare situation, I will be far more sympathetic than I would have been before, because I've had that time off and I know what it's like. The next theme is around agency and choice. What was important to mothers, to their experiences, was a sense of agency. So in other words, the choices they were able to make or had to make to negotiate their parenthood. The mums were happy and proud when they had agency. All the mums wanted to be the key stakeholder, the key decision maker around their maternity leave, around their workload, around how much of themselves they brought to the workplace without sacrificing their careers. And some mums felt able and happy to make a positive choice. Kate, one mum, described, I wanted to believe it was possible to be a working mum at a high level in an organisation and be a really amazing, excellent mum, and I still believe that's possible. However, when the mums felt they had to compromise or sacrifice, they felt frustrated, they felt anxious, and they felt disappointed. Amy sums this up in the quote shown here. I guess I find it dissatisfying that you have to choose, and I'm disappointed that I feel I've had to give up bits of work. And finally, Zara states, I don't think women can have it all. I don't think we should be forced to have it all. I think that message is where guilt, mum guilt, comes from. And that's where the pressure comes from. And I think it's okay if I can't do all of that, because it should be near enough impossible. For dads, choice wasn't really as much of a theme. Choice didn't come into their thinking or experiences as much as it did for mum. The dads were simply making choices. Most didn't have to choose between being a father or being a worker, between career and their parenthood. It was not something that they talked about. The only thing dads did talk about was they described how they could choose whether or not they shared their parental identity. And when dads were frustrated by the systems, they described how they were able to speak up and take agency, saying it was their choice not to miss out on their children. There was an assumption and an expectation that they can simply make their own choices. So this all felt very different to the experiences of the mums. The next theme is around role models. So mums were able to speak at length about role models. They felt they had access to many role models over the years from various parts of their lives, from family, from friends, from work, and showing them that being a parent and working is possible, as this quote here from Anea shows. Most of my group of friends, even though I'm the oldest, I was the last one to have a baby in the group. And I think they kind of shaped and kind of showed that being a parent and working can be done. And the women the mums were describing as their role models were the ones who were perceived to be managing their work-life balance, managing having a career whilst having a family. So mums talked about colleagues who did all the childcare and they were successful in their job and they still enjoyed both parts of their lives, as Nicole describes here. My ideal role model is someone who manages to do well in work, to meet their career goals, who are clear about what they want from their career, but they're also meeting their children's needs as well. So in some ways, some of these role models could be seen as more intimidating than inspiring, resulting in pressure on mums to have it all. As we mentioned earlier, around the theme of balance, mums wanting or trying to be superwoman. And then finally, within this theme, I just wanted to mention how the mums saw the importance of dads being role models. So Anaya describes, I want to see men showing they're prioritising their families. It's not always the maternal parent at the forefront of this journey. Those kinds of things are really important. I don't think it's just women demonstrating being role models, it's men being role models, that they're equal parents. Now, for the men, for the dads, things were very different around the themes of role models. Dads struggled to identify a visible role model. When they were asked the question, they seemed to not know what to say and hadn't actually given it any thought. They then described the challenge of having no one showing them the way, no one to support them, no one to normalise working fathers, and described how it would be beneficial to have more role models. So Andrew on here describing, I don't know, you just find your way in the dark without having other people to sort of show you what to do. After considering the idea of role models when they were questioned about it, the dads then started to refer to their own fathers as someone they wanted to use as a role model or not. After this, dads then turned to role models at work. Most of the dads were talking about a lack of role models in their organisation. So almost all the dads at this point then went on to describe themselves as being role models for others. They described how they were proud that they are pioneers and leading the way for future generations. So there's a couple of quotes here for William. He says, for the majority, it's my generation who are leading this. We will be the role models in the future. And Krishna describes, I hope when my children look back, I'm their role model and their mother's their role model. And then organisational management. This is one of the bigger themes that came out of the findings. For mums, organisational management varies widely. Their experiences, the women we interviewed, their experiences varied from being great, flexible, supportive working environments to really shocking and upsetting examples of discrimination, really, really hard to listen to, some of the examples, some of the stories the mums provided. There's a huge theme, lots of points to cover, as you can see from all the quotes. The first theme is around availability and efficiency of leave policies and requests. These are critical. So mums described how hard it was to get the information they wanted from HR. One mum, Kate, the quote shown in the bottom left-hand side here, she recalled having what she thought were formal conversations with HR, only to discover actually they were only informal conversations. And so she was told not to submit any paperwork. And then this resulted in a really delayed and frustrating process for her because no one in HR seemed to know what the policy was, the process was, no one was helping her. So it became clear that lots of mums then relied on their parents. And then organisational management. This was one of the biggest themes that came out of the findings. And for mums, the organisational management varies widely. So their experiences ranged from really great, flexible, supportive work environments to really shocking and upsetting stories we listened to in the interviews. where mums were describing discrimination and just finding things really hard, really upsetting stories. And this is a huge theme. You can see that from the number of quotes on the slide, lots of stories focused on this area. The first story I want to mention is around the availability and efficiency of leave policies and requests. These are critical. So mums were talking about how hard it was to get information from HR. There's a mum, Kate, whose quotes on the slide. She recalled having what she thought were formal processes with HR, only to discover that they were informal processes. She'd not handed in any paperwork, and the result of this was a delayed and really long, frustrating process for her. No one in HR knew what the processes were or what the policy was. So that delayed all of the paperwork that she had to submit. It became clear that the mums then started to rely on their managers rather than HR for support, and that their managers were key to supporting their career progression. Managers were often the first point of contact for women transitioning into working mums. And for one mum, Melissa, her line manager was the first person, aside from her husband, that she informed about being pregnant. That's the quote on the top right of the slide. And the relationship between mums and their managers also set the tone for the mums' return to work experiences. A negative relationship between a working mum and their manager can be detrimental to the mum's confidence, trust, overall experiences. This bottom right quote from Jennifer, she describes how her manager's behaviour had a lasting negative impact on her, but she is still hopeful. She still wants to get to a place where her and her manager could have more honest conversations about her career. My one wish for myself is that I get to a point where I can have very more honest conversations with my manager without feeling the need to get upset. I'd like to talk to her about my career. On the other hand, a strong positive relationship with the manager can be reinforcing for working mums, navigating their dual identities and roles. For example, support and flexibility from a manager allows mums to ease back into work and manage their time between their job and their family. And for mums who had managers with similar experiences who were parents themselves, they appreciated the relatability of their position. So there's a quote from a mum, Zara, on the slide. We've got a really wonderful woman in. When I returned back to work, it was like, no pressure. That definitely made it easier for me. She was great because she understood the entire journey. She'd done it twice, so it was really helpful. And then for dads, when considering dads and organisations, their frustrations they were talking about all sat with the system, with the HR, with department, with policies. There's some example quotes on the slides that you can see when dads are describing the organisational system. They're saying, I was at my wit's end, I was frustrated, I was exhausted, I was disenfranchised. David describes the HR department. It was an unhelpful distraction to have essentially a whole team of people that are set up to try and stop you doing what you wanted to do. In many of the companies, HR policies for parental leave are minimal at best, leaving dads to figure out their path, and many of them combining multiple leave policies to get parental leave. You can see this quote from Will on the top left-hand corner of the slide. Will was combining 2 weeks of paternity leave, 6 weeks of parental leave, 4 weeks of unpaid leave, 3 weeks of holiday. He was doing everything he could to combine leave to get him the most time off, but not have a huge financial impact. As I mentioned before, dads focus on finances, and this is a source of anxiety for them. So the implication for many dads is that they, along with their partners, must either continue to work to avoid losing income, which leaves both parents with less time to spend with their children, or they stop working and rely on single income for a period, leaving the family with limited resources. And also for the dads, there was comparisons made and reflections on the differences between the policies for mums and for dads, and resulting in dads feeling quite frustrated and underappreciated. So you can see a quote from Justin on here. I think they should offer whatever they offer to women. There shouldn't be any distinction. There shouldn't be maternity or paternity. There should just be parental. I said to my CEO, this is outrageous. This is sexual discrimination because you're offering much better benefits for women than for men. And then the last quote I wanted to include here was from a dad called James. Tokenism plays a big part. Everyone is aware of what they should be saying, but saying things is one thing. Actually doing it is a very different matter. So people say we're going to support you as a working parent, but they don't actually do it.